Picture yourself right now, wherever you are sitting. Feel the weight of your body, the rhythm of your breath. Now imagine that every struggle you have ever faced, every heartbreak that shattered you, every moment of joy that lifted you up was chosen by you. Not the you that exists in this moment, but the deeper you that existed long before your first cry echoed through the delivery room. I have dared to map the hidden territories of the human psyche, and I claim something that will either terrify you or set you free. I say your soul made a contract with existence itself before you were born. Every pain, every triumph, every person who would break your heart or heal it, all of it was selected from a cosmic menu that only your soul could see. Sounds impossible? I have spent my entire life proving otherwise, and what I have discovered will change how you see every scar on your body and every shadow in your heart. I call it individuation, but that word is too small for what I really mean. I am talking about the soul's ancient hunger to know itself completely. Not just the pretty parts, not just the parts that win approval from others, but the whole terrifying, magnificent truth of what you are. Think about this for a moment. Right now, you are living inside a story that began writing itself before time had meaning for you. I believe that before birth, the soul looks at all possible lives like someone browsing through an infinite library, and then it chooses the one book that will teach it the most about love, fear, courage, and forgiveness. Why would any soul choose pain? I have an answer that cuts like a surgeon's blade. I say the soul does not seek happiness, it seeks wholeness, and wholeness can only come through facing what you most want to avoid. Every shadow you try to hide, every wound you carry, every fear that wakes you at 3 in the morning, I would say this is not punishment. This is curriculum. You signed up for this specific course in being human because your soul knew that only through these exact experiences could you become who you were meant to be. But here is where my revelation becomes truly frightening. I claim that we do not just choose our suffering. We choose our parents, our circumstances, even our enemies. That person who hurt you so deeply you still feel the ache years later. According to what I have discovered, your soul handpicked them to teach you something you could learn no other way. Stop and think about the people who have shaped you most. Not the ones who made life easy, but the ones who forced you to grow, who pushed you beyond what you thought you could handle. I see these as sacred contracts written in a language older than words. I once treated a patient who came to me broken by a series of betrayals. Every person she had ever trusted had eventually let her down. She wanted to know why her life was cursed with such pain. I looked at her and said something that shocked her into silence. You chose them all. Your soul knew that only by experiencing the depth of betrayal could you learn the true meaning of trust. This is not victim blaming. This is something far more radical. I believe that at the deepest level, there are no victims and no villains. There are only souls playing roles in each other's awakening. But if this is true, then why do we forget? Why does every child come into this world with no memory of making such choices? I have an answer for this too, one that reveals the most beautiful secret of human existence. I say we forget so that we can experience surprise. We forget so that love can catch us off guard, so that courage can emerge when we thought we had none left, so that forgiveness can feel like a miracle instead of a scripted line. Imagine if you remembered choosing your difficult childhood, your broken heart, your financial struggles. The learning would be different, wouldn't it? You would move through life like an actor who knows all the plot twists. But the soul wants more than knowledge. It wants the raw, unscripted experience of discovering its own strength. I have spent years studying what I call the collective unconscious, that vast underwater ocean of memory and wisdom that connects all souls. And there I found evidence that shook me. Dreams, symbols, myths that appeared across all cultures and time periods, as if humanity was remembering something it had once known and forgotten. I began to understand that individual souls and the cosmic soul are connected by invisible threads. When one soul chooses to incarnate, to take on flesh and blood and heartbreak, it is not just choosing for itself, it is choosing to serve something larger. Every life, I realized, is both a personal journey and a gift to the collective. Your struggles teach not only you, but everyone whose life you touch. Your courage becomes part of humanity's courage. Your love adds to the total love available in the universe. This is why I say no soul ever chooses an easy life. Easy lives lives teach little and inspire no one. The souls that impact the world most deeply are always the ones who walked through fire and emerged with their light intact. But here comes the part that will either liberate you or terrify you completely. I believe that once you understand this truth, once you really see that your soul chose this exact life with all its pain and beauty, you can begin to rewrite the contract, not by changing what has already happened. The past remains the past, but by changing how you relate to what is happening now. Every moment becomes a choice point. Will you resist what your soul selected for you, or will you lean into it and discover what it came to teach? I have worked with patients who had been carrying the same psychological wounds for decades: anxiety, depression, rage, addiction, the feeling that life was happening to them rather than through them. And time after time, I have watched miracles occur when people finally understood that they were not victims of their circumstances, but co-creators of them. One woman had been trapped in a cycle of abusive relationships her entire adult life. Every man she chose seemed to repeat the same patterns of control and cruelty. She came to me convinced she was cursed or broken beyond repair. I spent months helping her explore not just her conscious desires, but the deeper currents of her psyche. And finally, she had a dream that changed everything. In the dream, she was standing in a vast room filled with doors. Behind each door was a different man, a different potential relationship. And in the dream, she realized she had been choosing the same door over and over again, drawn by something she could not name. When she woke up, she understood. Her soul had been trying to learn something about her own power, her own worth, her own ability to say no. Every abusive man had been a teacher, offering her the same lesson in different forms until she was ready to learn it. The next time she met someone who showed early signs of controlling behavior, instead of falling into the familiar pattern, she walked away. It was the first time in her life she had ever done that, and I watched as her entire existence began to transform. This is what I mean when I say we can rewrite the contract. The soul's original choice remains, but how we fulfill it, that is always up to us. I have discovered that the psyche has its own wisdom, its own timing. I have noticed that certain life crises always seem to happen at specific ages: the midlife crisis, the quarter life crisis, the spiritual awakening that often comes in the 50s or 60s. I began to see these not as random breakdowns, but as scheduled downloads of the soul's original plan. At each stage of life, I believe, the soul releases new information about why you are here and what you came to accomplish, the restlessness you feel, the sudden desire to change everything about your life, the sense that you have been living someone else's dreams instead of your own. I see these as the soul's way of getting your attention. I call it the call to adventure. And I have noticed that those who answer the call, who dare to follow where their deepest instincts lead them, find a kind of aliveness that nothing else can provide, while those who ignore the call often find their lives becoming increasingly empty and meaningless. But here is what I understand that most people miss. The soul's plan is not about external success. It is not about becoming famous or wealthy or powerful. It is about becoming real, completely authentically real. I have watched people who had everything the world tells us to want: money, status, admiration, and yet they sat in my office with empty eyes and hollow hearts. And I have watched people who had lost everything they thought they needed, who had been stripped down to nothing but their own naked humanity, and they glowed with an inner fire that could light up a room. The difference, I realized, was not in what had happened to them, but in how they had metabolized what happened to them. Had they let their experiences make them bitter and closed, or had they allowed their pain to crack them open into compassion? Every wound, I say, is a doorway, but not everyone chooses to walk through. I believe that the ultimate purpose of every human life is what I call the union of opposites. We come here to integrate our light and our shadow, our strength and our vulnerability, our love and our fear. We come here to discover that we are not just one thing, but a magnificent contradiction that somehow holds together. This is why every soul chooses challenges that will force this integration. You cannot know your courage without facing your fear. You cannot know your capacity for love without experiencing loss. You cannot know your own light without walking through darkness. And here is the secret that I whisper to those who are ready to hear it. Once you accept that your soul chose this life, chose these exact circumstances, circumstances for reasons that may be hidden from your conscious mind but are perfectly clear to your deeper wisdom, something miraculous happens. You stop fighting your life and start dancing with it. You stop asking why me and start asking what now. You stop being the victim of your story and become its author. But I warn that this understanding comes with a terrible responsibility. If your soul chose this life, if every person and situation in your path was placed there for your learning and growth, then there is no one left to blame. There is only you and your choices about how to respond. Some people, when they first grasp this truth, feel a crushing weight of responsibility. You mean everything that has ever happened to me is somehow my fault? But I shake my head. Not fault, I say. Choice. There is a vast difference. Fault implies something went wrong. Choice implies that everything is unfolding exactly as it was meant to, even when it feels like chaos, even when it breaks your heart, even when you cannot see the purpose. And this brings us to my most radical insight about death. If the soul chooses the circumstances of birth, does it also choose the circumstances of death? I have spent years studying near-death experiences, talking to people who had glimpsed what lies beyond the threshold of physical existence. What I have learned convinced me that death, like birth, is not something that happens to us, but something we participate in. The soul, I believe, has a sense of when its earthly curriculum is complete, when it has learned what it came here to learn, or taught what it came here to teach. This does not mean that people choose to die in the way we usually think of choice. It means that at a level deeper than conscious thought, the soul recognizes when its time in physical form is finished and begins the process of transition. I have noticed that people often seem to die in ways that reflect the central themes of their lives. The person who had spent their whole life struggling with control might die in a situation where they had to surrender completely. The person who had always been afraid of being alone might die surrounded by everyone they loved. Even in death, I see the soul's wisdom at work, orchestrating one final lesson, one last opportunity for growth or healing or completion. But what comes after? I am careful never to make definitive claims about what happens beyond death, but I will share what my research suggests. I believe that the soul reviews the life it has just lived, not with judgment, but with the compassion of a teacher reviewing a student's work. What was learned? What was left unfinished? What patterns need to be healed? And then, based on that review, the soul makes its next choice. Another incarnation with new lessons or movement into realms of existence that the human mind cannot comprehend. I have noticed that many of my patients have dreams or visions of lives they have never lived, relationships with people they have never met, skills they have never learned. I began to wonder if these were memories leaking through from other incarnations, other chapters in the soul's long education. But whether you believe in reincarnation or not, my essential message remains the same. You are not a random accident stumbling through a meaningless universe. You are a soul with a purpose, living a life that was chosen with infinite care and wisdom, even if that wisdom is sometimes hidden from your conscious mind. Every person you meet, every challenge you face, every moment of beauty that takes your breath away, all of it is part of a curriculum designed specifically for your growth and awakening. And the most beautiful part, you do not have to wait until death to glimpse the larger pattern. I believe that through dreams, through synchronicity, through the symbols and signs that appear in your daily life, your soul is constantly trying to remind you of why you are here. The question is not whether your soul chose this life. The question is whether you will choose to live it fully, to embrace both its darkness and its light, to extract every lesson it came here to teach you. I leave you with a challenge that echoes across the decades since my death. Stop living as if life is happening to you. Start living as if you and life are co-creating something magnificent together. Because that, I would say, is not just what you came here to do. It is what you are already doing, whether you realize it or not. The only question is whether you will do it consciously with your full participation and celebration, or continue to sleepwalk through the greatest adventure your soul will ever undertake.